There was a time when motorcycles didn't have traction control, riding modes, or computers to save you. There was just an engine, two wheels, and your courage. They were pure wild machines that demanded respect at every turn. Some became legends, others turned into true beasts that were impossible to tame. Today, we're going to travel back to that golden era to discover the best motorcycles without electronics. When riding was a real challenge. Between the 1970s and the late 90s, motorcycling went through one of the fastest technical evolutions in its entire history. In just 2 decades, engines went from producing 60 or 70 horsepower to easily surpassing 150. Motorcycles became faster, more sophisticated, and way more capable than anything that had ever existed before. The top speed of many machines went from 200 kilometers per hour to nearly 300. But in the midst of that technological leap, there was still something that didn't exist: electronics. There were no sensors monitoring the rear wheel. There were no computers analyzing the lean angle. There were no systems correcting rider errors. Motorcycles relied solely on mechanical engineering, pure. Carburetors, cables, gears, hydraulic suspensions, and increasingly powerful brakes. The result was a completely direct experience. Between the machine and the rider, there were no filters. Everything that happened between the asphalt and the wheel went straight to your hands, your feet, and your body. Traction control was in your right wrist. This meant that every acceleration required sensitivity, every braking demanded precision, and every turn was a constant negotiation between physics, technique, and courage. Yes, did you open the throttle? Too fast? The rear wheel would slide. If you braked too hard, you'd lock up the wheel. And if you made a mistake, the bike wasn't going to save you. Number 10, Honda XR600R, the hammer of the desert. If you ever tried to start a Honda XR600, you know exactly what we're talking about. It wasn't a bike you just started up. It was a bike you had to negotiate with. A huge single-cylinder engine with brutal compression that demanded an almost religious ritual to get it going. Find top dead set it. Slowly lower the kick lever. And only then give it the right kick. If you messed up, the bike would return the favor. And it did so violently. A lot of riders quickly learned that an XR600R could start up, or it could give you a crash course in basic anatomy right in your shin. It featured a single-cylinder, 4-stroke engine with 591 cubic centimeters, about 45 horsepower, air cooling, a Caheen carburetor, and kickstart only. All mounted on an extremely robust tubular steel frame with long travel suspension for enduro riding and a dry weight of around 135 kilos. The engine used the RFVC system, radial 4-valve combustion, a technology that positioned the valves at a radial angle to improve airflow and combustion. This allowed it to generate more power and torque in a relatively simple single-cylinder engine. The result was an engine that pulled hard from low revs and seemed like it would never stop climbing mountains. Where other bikes needed speed, the XR just needed traction. The XR600R wasn't a fast bike in a straight line compared to a sport bike, but on tough terrain, it was practically unstoppable. Mud, rocks, deep sand, or mountain trails, everything seemed easy for this machine. Its massive torque allowed it to climb impossible slopes without needing to rev the engine. It just kept moving forward like a high-performance tractor. Number 9. Yamaha VMX1200, the ultimate muscle bike. If the Honda XR600 was a hammer built to survive the desert, The Yamaha VMX 1200 was a cannon designed to destroy stoplights. When Yamaha introduced the VMX in 1985, the motorcycle world didn't really know what it was saying. It wasn't a sport bike, it wasn't a traditional cruiser, and it wasn't a touring bike either. It was something completely different. A muscle bike, a motorcycle built with just one goal in mind. It featured a 70-degree V4 engine, 1,198 cubic centimeters of displacement, around 145 horsepower, V-boost system, liquid cooling, 4 Mikuni carburetors, shaft drive transmission, weighing close to 280 kilos, 0 to 100 acceleration in about 2.7 seconds, and a top speed of approximately 230 kilometers per hour. But the real heart of the VMAX wasn't just its engine, it was the V-boost. This mechanical system connected the carburetors and pins. At low revs, each cylinder used its own carburetor, but when the engine went above about 6,000 RPM, some valves would open automatically. Suddenly, each cylinder could draw air from 2 carburetors. More air, more fuel, more explosion. It was like the engine activated an invisible turbo. The result was a brutal kick of power at the top end of the tachometer. The engine went from strong to violent, and the feeling was one of a kind. There was no traction control. There was no electronics to smooth out the power delivery. When the V-boost kicked in, the bike would just rocket forward. The VMAX didn't accelerate, it teleported. This quickly turned it into a legend of urban drag racing. In the 80s and 90s, few bikes could compete with its straight-line acceleration. Even many superbikes at the time had trouble keeping up with it in the first few meters. But that obsession with acceleration came at a price. The VMAX wasn't famous for its handling in corners. Its chassis wasn't designed for aggressive sport riding. The suspension, it was relatively soft, and the bike's overall weight was considerable. On winding roads, it demanded respect and a more relaxed riding style. The brakes weren't extraordinary either, considering the level of power it had. They were adequate, but nothing special. It wasn't a bike for attacking mountain curves. It was a bike for conquering the straightaway. And that's where it shined. Number 8. Kawasaki ZX10 Tomcat. Before the ZZR 1100 became the princess of speed in the early 90s, Kawasaki already had a monster ready. That bike was the ZX10 Tomcat, introduced in the late 80s as the brand's flagship superbike. It was big, powerful, and physically imposing. It wasn't a delicate or compact bike. It was a machine built for pure speed, especially on highways and long straightaways. It had an inline 4-cylinder engine with a displacement of 997 cubic centimeters, power close to 135 to 150 horsepower depending on the version, liquid cooling, large diameter Keihin carburetors, an approximate dry weight of 228 kilos, and a top speed close to 270 kilometers per hour. At the time, these numbers were huge. The engine delivered powerful and very progressive performance, with an enormous capacity to eat up miles at high speed. The CTX-10 was a bike designed for straight-line stability and strong acceleration, more like a highway hypersport than an agile track machine. The chassis was long and solid, which helped maintain stability at extremely high speeds, but it also made the bike feel heavy and demanding in tight corners. It wasn't clumsy, but it did require respect and experience from the rider to get the best out of it. The ZX10 Tomcat paved the way for what would come next. Kawasaki learned a lot with this bike about power, stability, and aerodynamics at high speed. All that knowledge would end up exploding just a few years later with the arrival of the ZZR 1007. The bike that would ultimately become the fastest in the world. Coming in at number 7, the Yamaha RD500 LC, which is widely known as the Street GP. In the 1980s, Yamaha made a decision that today seems almost impossible: to bring Grand Prix technology directly to the street. While many brands were trying to tame sport bikes to make them easier to handle, Yamaha did the opposite. They created a bike directly inspired by their racing machines. That's how the RD500 LC was born. The idea was simple but wild: to build a street bike that replicated what was racing in the 500cc World Championship. The result was a machine that looked like it came straight out of a MotoGP paddock. It featured a 2-stroke V4 engine with a displacement of 499 cubic centimeters, liquid cooling around 85 to 90 horsepower, i.e. PVS valve system, an approximate dry weight of 180 kilos, and a top speed close to 240 kilometers an hour. The engine was a work of engineering art. It used a 2-stroke V4 configuration, with 4 cylinders working together, just like a real racing bike. This allowed it to rev up at an incredible speed and deliver power explosively when the engine hit the high end of the tachometer. The sound was unique. It wasn't the deep roar of a 4-stroke bike. It was a metallic, high-pitched, furious scream, very similar to the Grand Prix bikes of that era. When you started it up, it didn't feel like a street bike. It felt like you were in the paddock at a racetrack. But all that technology also had its dark side. The power delivery was abrupt and demanding. At low revs, the engine could feel relatively tame, but when it hit the power band, the bike transformed. It accelerated with a violence that could catch even experienced riders off guard. It didn't have traction control. It didn't have any electronics. It didn't have any rider aids. All you had was your right wrist and your courage. Number 6, Honda CBX1000, the Mechanical Symphony. At the end of the 1970s, when most manufacturers were trying to make faster and lighter bikes, Honda decided to do something completely different. Instead of following market logic, they created a machine designed to impress the world at first glance. That's how the Honda CBX1000 was born, a bike that looked like it came straight out of an engineering lab obsessed with mechanical perfection. The idea was clear: put 6 cylinders in line on a production motorcycle, something that at the time seemed over the top, even by Honda's standards. It featured a 6-cylinder inline engine with a displacement of 1,047 cubic centimeters, around 105 horsepower, air cooling, 6 independent Caheen carburetors, double overhead camshafts, DOHC, a weight of 247 kilos, and a top speed close to 220 kilometers an hour. The engine was the real star of the show. The 6 cylinders ran with extraordinary smoothness. It almost completely eliminated the vibrations that were common in many motorcycles of that era. Each cylinder had its own carburetor, which allowed for extremely precise fueling. But what really made the CBX famous wasn't just its engineering, it was its sound. When you started it up, the engine didn't roar like a traditional superbike, nor did it vibrate like a big twin-cylinder. She sang. The 6 cylinders generated a mechanical, soft and harmonious note, which many compared to a musical instrument. Number 5. Yamaha RD350. The two steps that educated a generation. If you learned to ride fast in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, it's very likely it was on a Yamaha RD350. This bike became a real training ground for riders, thanks to its combination of lightweight, powerful two-stroke engine and a very unique character. Parallel twin-cylinder two-stroke engine. With a displacement of 347 cubic centimeters, approximately 45 to 50 horsepower, weighing around 155 kilos, and a top speed of about 180 kilometers per hour. The RD350 had something that left a mark on an entire generation. The famous power band. At low revs, it was relatively calm, but when the engine started to rev up, the power would kick in all at once. Down low, it was tame. Up high, it was an explosion. That's why it earned a reputation as a bike that really taught you how to ride. Many riders learned how to go fast on an RD350. And a lot of them also learned to respect the throttle after crashing once. Number 4. Kawasaki GPZ900R. In 1984, Kawasaki introduced a bike that changed the history of sport motorcycles. The GPZ900R. It was the first bike to carry the Ninja name, and when it launched, it became the fastest production motorcycle in the world. It wasn't just a powerful bike, it was a machine ahead of its time, introducing technology that would later become standard in superbikes. It featured a 908 cubic centimeter inline four-cylinder engine, liquid cooling, around 115 horsepower, weighing in at about 228 kilos, and a top speed of around 250 kilometers per hour. The GPZ900R was revolutionary because it combined power, stability, and aerodynamics at a level few bikes had achieved before. Its chassis and engine layout allowed for more precise handling at high speed, something fundamental for a motorcycle that exceeded 240 kilometers per hour with relative ease. Number 3. Suzuki GSXR 750. The one that changed everything. In 1985, Suzuki introduced a motorcycle that forever changed the world of sport bikes, the GSXR 750. Up until that time, many motorcycles were powerful but also heavy and imprecise in curves. Suzuki decided to break with that logic and build a motorcycle directly inspired by racing. It had a four-cylinder inline engine with a displacement of 749 cubic centimeters, power of around 100 horsepower, dry weight of only 176 kilos, air oil cooling system, SACs, and a top speed close to 240 kilometers per hour. It had aerodynamics directly inspired by Suzuki's endurance racing bikes. The addition of a full aerodynamic fairing helped significantly minimize air resistance and greatly enhanced high-speed stability, allowing it to reach nearly 240 kilometers per hour with much greater efficiency. The real secret of the GSXR 750 wasn't just its power, it was its weight. Meanwhile, many sport bikes of the time weighed over 220 or even 230 kilos. The GSXR was dozens of kilos lighter. That made it faster in corners, more agile, and much closer to a real race bike. Its aluminum frame, aggressive riding position, and racing philosophy marked the birth of the modern superbike. It was a race bike that by accident happened to have a license plate. Number 2. Suzuki Hayabusa, the one that broke the system. At the end of the 1990s, Suzuki decided to do something that no one had dared to do so radically. Build the fastest motorcycle in the world without any kind of compromise. That's how the Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300R was born in 1999. a machine specifically designed to dominate the speed war among Japanese manufacturers. The result was a bike that shattered all known limits. It featured an inline four-cylinder engine with a displacement of 1,299 cubic centimeters, around 175 horsepower, extremely refined aerodynamics, an approximate weight of about 215 kilos, and a top speed of around 312 kilometers per hour. The Hayabusa wasn't just powerful. Its aerodynamic design was meant to cut through the air with the least resistance possible, making it possible for it to reach speeds that, up until then, seemed impossible for a production motorcycle. When it came out, it clearly outperformed all its rivals in terms of top speed. Suzuki broke the internet before the internet even existed. Number 1. Kawasaki H2 750, the bike that scared the world. In the early 70s, Kawasaki decided to do something very simple and very dangerous: build the most brutally accelerating motorcycle possible. The result was the Kawasaki H2 750 Mach 4, a machine that quickly earned a fearsome reputation all over the world. It wasn't a bike designed to be balanced or refined. It was a bike built to accelerate like no other. Three-cylinder inline two-stroke engine with a displacement of 748 cubic centimeters, around 74 horsepower, triple carburetors, an approximate weight of about 192 kilos, a top speed close to 200 kilometers per hour, and a quarter-mile acceleration that was extremely fast for its time. The problem, or the legend, was the combination of its engine with the rest of the bike. The three-cylinder two-stroke delivered its power in a brutal and sudden way, especially when it hit its power band. But the chassis wasn't built to handle that much force. It was relatively flexible, the brakes were standard for the time, and the suspension wasn't designed for that kind of acceleration either. The result was a bike that could become unpredictable if you open the throttle with too much confidence. It was a bike that tried to kill you, and did it fast. Many riders loved it for its brutal acceleration, while others were deeply afraid of it. It wasn't an easy bike to handle. It demanded respect, quick reflexes, and a very precise throttle hand. But that's exactly why it became a legend. The H2 Mach 4 represented a time when bikes were raw, violent, and completely honest. There was no electronics, no aids, no systems to protect you from your own mistakes. There was only the engine and guts. That's why the H2 wasn't just a fast bike. It was one of the most feared motorcycles in history. These bikes weren't perfect, they weren't safe, they weren't easy to handle, but they were honest. They didn't have sensors measuring every movement of the tire. They had character. They didn't have traction control. No power maps, no computers correcting your mistakes. They had soul. They were straightforward machines with no filters, built in an era when the only electronics between the rider and the engine was the ignition switch. When you twisted the throttle, the bike responded without asking, and if you made a mistake, it responded to that too. And when you rode them, you understood something very clearly. Everything depended on you. On your sensitivity, on your experience, on your respect for the machine. Because today's bikes are faster, smarter, more stable, and without a doubt, safer. Modern technology can save you from a skid, correct a misjudged brake, or smooth out an overly aggressive acceleration. But there's something that's no longer made. That unique moment when the rider and the machine fought for control. When every turn was a test of skill. When every burst of acceleration was a decision. And when every kilometer traveled felt earned. Because the best bikes weren't the smartest ones. They weren't the most electronic. They were the most real. The ones that forced you to learn. The ones that demanded respect from you. The ones that turned every ride into an intense, imperfect, and deeply human experience. Because in the end, the most memorable bikes weren't the ones that protected you from everything. They were the ones that made you feel truly alive.